Hey, friends, this is Pastor Rob Tucker with Between Sundays here at Watkins United Methodist Church. This is going to be a short space to keep the conversation going after worship because faith doesn't stop at the benediction, and most of life really happens between Sundays. See, this week we began our Lenten journey with Mark chapter 1, verses 9 through 15, where it describes Jesus' baptism and his time in the wilderness. And what strikes me every year is the order of all of it. Jesus is baptized, the heavens tear open, and a voice declares, "You are my beloved." And then immediately, the Spirit drives him into the wilderness. Not after failure, not because he messed up, not as a punishment, but after his belovedness. And I think that's important. See, Jesus doesn't go into the wilderness to prove who he is. He goes in the wilderness already named beloved, and that reframes everything. Because most of us assume wilderness means we've done something wrong. When life gets hard, or when faith feels dry, or when we've exhausted or uncertain, we assume God must be distant. But Mark tells us something different. The Spirit leads Jesus into the wilderness, and the angels minister to him there, which means wilderness is not abandonment, it is formation. See, Lent, the season of Lent is not about earning God's love. It's about letting go of the things that keep us from trusting it. So here are a few questions I want you to carry with you this week. First, where does life feel like wilderness right now? Where does life feel like wilderness right now? Maybe for you that's parenting or it's work or it's church or it's this internal restlessness you can't name. Instead of asking, how do I escape this? Try asking, what might God be forming in me here? Here's a second question. What voices are loud in your wilderness? What voices are loud in your wilderness? See, temptation, the Gospel of Mark is very brief, but we know the kinds of temptations Jesus faced: power without sacrifice, influence without humility, shortcuts to glory. I wonder what yours are. Maybe it's the temptation to control everything. Maybe it's the temptation to numb yourself or to prove yourself or just to win. Just notice, because Lent begins with awareness. What voices are loud in your wilderness? And the third one I'm thinking about this week is, can you practice belovedness before productivity? Can you practice belovedness before productivity? This is my big question for this week. Because before you accomplish anything today on a Monday, if you're listening today, before you respond to all of the emails, before you solve any of the problems that you have going on, pause. Take one full breath. And remember, you are beloved. Not because you've performed well, not because you held everything together, not because your faith was impressive, but because God names you that way. So here's about one simple practice for you this week. Each morning before checking your phone, place your feet on the floor and say quietly, "Today I begin as beloved." So when you wake up, get up, sit up, put your feet on the floor and say this phrase: "Today I begin as beloved." That's it. No long prayer required. Just begin there. Because if Jesus faced the wilderness grounded in belovedness, maybe we can too. See, I think, friends, Lent is not about becoming miserable. It's about becoming honest. And it's about letting the wilderness strip away what isn't true so that we can rediscover what is. And here, what I know to be true: God does not abandon what God leads. So even in the wilderness, you are not alone. Today, I begin as beloved. Say that with me. Today, I begin as beloved. Thanks for spending a few minutes between Sundays. Grace and peace, my friends. I'll see you next week.